drafts, ideas, imaginations of a non-monetary world, or of a currency and trade-free one-world society. First, there would be no gigantic upheavals, at least there are already in all areas of progressive knowledge and developments, which are so far, however, reduced to an idealistic niche existence, sometimes even suppressed. In any case, a much lower duty or basic working time, which would be done, according to intrinsic predispositions, but also by extrinsic motivation, for example through community processes and actions. Certainly, the next decades, with regard to the fastest possible rebuilding of the energy system on a 100% regenerative basis, the material provision in the sense of a circular economy and the biological carbon capture from the atmosphere become very labor-intensive. For immediate, massive reforestation and restoration, the creation of peatlands and bogs, for example the people employed today in the financial and taxation industries, as well as in the arms industries and armies of the world could be addressed. It would be important to free the world from the littering, the consequences of consumerism, the throwaway society and the plastic packing insanity, as soon and as completely as possible to liberate, especially the oceans for the salvation of the marine life, particularly whales, as a factor of CO2 capture. A stabilization of the wildlife on land and in the water, the coral reefs, a committed counteraction against the mass extinction of species. A changed media world can lead to a rethink, a cultural change and mass actions in this regard. The protection of nature, the preservation, or the restoration of a broad biodiversity, as a basis for the integration and adaptation of civilized sophistication could then be a natural part of any further development. Instead of planned obsolescence and psychic obsolescence, high-quality, modular products would instead be produced. The time of overconsumption and waste, the destruction of food and goods will be a thing of the past, which amounts to a huge saving in labor. The value maintenance and repair sector, repair shops and recycling would be given a much higher value. A change to alternative mobility concepts and the widespread relocation of logistics to rail would in historical relationship uncover the current relative nonsense of individual automobile traffic, approximately 10 square meters plus 1.4 tons, SUVs up to 2.5 tons, to transport an average of 1 to 2 people, including the resources and working time to be saved. There would be a healthier, more sociable and city-enhancing mobility, where cycling and other forms of micro-mobility combined with electrified public transport would be the dominant means of transportation. Long-distance routes would be made predominantly in expansive and sweeping trains, of which rails could be placed on today's motorways as well. In the healthcare sector, preventive care would be a priority, and much less medicine would be used. Due to a low pollutant, semi-natural environment, pathogenic influences would be largely absent. There would be a universal cultural change away from the money and career plus consumerism doctrine, towards more community-oriented values. Through the involvement of all members of the Earth community, the participation of all formerly excluded from the work processes, condemned to unemployment, occupied with sometimes superfluous job creation schemes, especially in the less industrialized, poorer countries, thus a much higher human productive power would be available than it is the case today. In addition to the already existing and ongoing developments of a largely automated production, including 3D printers, maybe even up to 3D factory street printers in the future. The school system and education would be much more individualized and practice-oriented, at any rate without grading and selection procedures, and would place the highest value on each adolescent's most distinctive development of intrinsic skills and talents, including team-oriented, group dynamic methods. The caused by financial systems, Unspeakable animal suffering, factory farming, animal testing, big game hunting and poaching would then hopefully be over. All things considered, there would be a shift to a small-scale, decentralized task distribution, which would be in connection with the universal. Similar to an interplay and interaction of decentralized units and more central units in a network of the regenerative energy supply of humanity. Local, regional and global institutions would be formed, bringing together suggestions, proposals, ideas, inventions, critiques, issues of disputes and conflicts, etc., expounding them according to subject and local concerns on appropriate Internet platforms in full transparency. The spectrum would range from local to global, with interregional themes simultaneously written in an intercontinental language. This language would probably be English, while preserving and maintaining the various languages of the world, as well as there could be a renewed revival of regional traditions and cultures. Artisan and small community workshops for the production of regional products of various kinds would experience a boom. So also the artistic and cultural life. Think global, act local, would be a natural part of the towards more complex processes aligning, evolving way of thinking. In all likelihood, a change in character will take place, in the course of a general feeling, that one feels the better, the more one makes sure that fellow human beings feel better. Prostitution of any kind, sex industry activities would lose their monetary incentive and go down in history as an epoch. Women would play, according to their predominantly more pronounced, intuitive dispositions, a much more important role in organizing social processes and structures. Economic pressures on togetherness relationship models, and marital pair formation, to start and maintain a family would almost dissipate over time. In addition to very individual ways of living, strong and very close partnerships, sometimes lifelong love relationships, there would be cultivated, possibly even predominantly, much more open, promiscuously, multifarious, albeit not conflict-free, interpersonal relationships. Accordingly, a more unbound way in lived sexuality. There would hardly be any more morbid isolation, without that being recognized and remedied by many sides. Aging and old people reintegrated and involved into processes of social life, exclusion due to lower efficiency not happen, activities being followed up into old age. In the discussion of a possible reduction in the world population, such structures, including a more community-oriented and responsible parenting, could be in favor of a steady or declining population. There would be a more open-minded interaction within the very multifarious community groups, which is to characterize by values of respect, appreciation of each other, as well as a positive, critical social interaction. Narrow-minded, petty leadership claims or pomposity, but also lies and imposture, petty criminal behavior, thievery, extortions, etc. would lose its sense and purpose. As a result, a penal system would presumably even get by without prisons. Community harming acts would be addressed in a direct manner by the affected community in a way, which then aims to help the causer of damages to learn from this behavior, without the latter having to be locked out or reduced in personal value. Urban development, residential areas, housing and residential communities would all model themselves according to the changed social structures of living together. Sharing, bartering, gifting, and a variety of other social design projects would be a key component in the regional local community. There would be a lively exchange, in terms of mobility within the framework of environmental sustainability, within and by the entire world population. It would lead to global intermingling and regroupment, less by shorter faraway vacation trips, rather by longer-term work and occupation stays, which could easily be arranged in the context of global networkings, in case world experiences and explorations are individually desired. Newcomers warmly received, unconditionally and without reservation, sisterly and brotherly, in a cosmopolitan manner. No mass movements and displacements would have to be absorbed, except that they would have been caused by the aftermath of the ongoing and progressive climate catastrophe or other unforeseeable environmental events. Not to mention the millions of people in the armies and armaments industries of the world, that war devastation of cities, regions and entire countries wouldn't take place. Likewise superfluous would be informer networks, spy and monitoring systems. Incidentally, as one of the first effects, hunger disasters, malnutrition, genocide, exploitative, slave-like employment, child labor, trafficking in human beings, etc., treated first-rate and eliminated en passant. Questions and problems concerning the possession and the supply of individually adapted needs would have to be clarified. In addition to distribution centers, now stores and department stores, a new distribution principle might have to be developed, or a consciousness should be promoted, which keeps the responsibility for the whole in view. A current ownership would be maintained. In the later stages of subsequent generations, for example, raffle systems could offer a solution for the more desirable objects in the real estate sector, whereupon their use would be granted for a certain period of time. Until also there a balance in this sector has been reached, or each has found his own individual way of life and dwelling, which would also always be adapted to dynamic changes and local needs. A third-party property, or a property that is currently operated, managed or used in solidarity, would remain similar in the organizational administration, but in the hierarchical structure developed to models such as self-organization in enterprises, collective intelligence, etc. Certainly, these are only rough conceptual drafts for discussion that develop, concretize or vary in further popularity or in the preparatory phase. Also, there will certainly be regional different developments.